So it was a redundant question
Yeah.
anyway.
So Sander invited me here today to talk just a little bit about what the PST candidate program looks like, what's involved in becoming a PST with scrum.org, and any questions you all might have. So I'll kind of ramble at you for maybe 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll just get into open Q&A if that works for y'all. Cool.
Let's want to just collect the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
And go from there. Cool.
That works. Okay, so I am going to screen share only because then you know how to self-serve some of this stuff. So if you have not been to the scrum.org website, this is what it looks like, scrum.org. Fortunately, our name and our website URL, so it's pretty easy to remember. And if you're looking for those details about how to become a trainer, the quickest way to get that is to go about and then become a professional Scrum trainer. And so this brings you to a landing page, which is just really got high level information. And then there's a couple pages behind this that are important. But we'll just start off with the initial phases of the PST candidate journey. It's 3 parts. The first is really all on you, and it's about core qualifications. The prerequisites are in here, and what we're really looking for is sort of alignment with scrum.org mission and values here. This is really what's going to lead you through the application as well as your initial interview. Phase 1 is really about admitting you as an official candidate into the PST journey. Phase 2 is all about knowledge and practical experience. And this for us is probably the most important differentiator that we're looking for, particularly in comparison to other large agile training organizations. It is very, very important for scrum.org to ensure that our PSTs truly have experience using Scrum in alignment with what we mean by professional Scrum in organizations in order to create value. So we're not looking for mechanical Scrum. We're not looking for stories about like, yes, and we stood up every day and talked to each other, and we had user stories, and every 2 weeks some people got together and we did a demo. Like, we're not looking for like that kind of like really actually not even using the correct language, right? I did that on purpose. Mechanical stories about Scrum, or wow, we put people together in a room and now they're happier. Yes, there is value from people being happier, but we're really looking for that experience using empiricism and using evidence to iterate towards achieving a sprint goal or achieving a product goal by adapting what our sprint goals are every sprint in order to get there. And that probably, in all honesty, is the single place where we are starting to see PST candidates struggle. And it's happening very early in the journey. You'll also see when we get into another level of detail, this is where knowledge-based assessments are. So the scrum.org portfolio of assessments or of certifications and the corresponding assessments that go on with those. We want to make sure that every PST has a good broad range of foundational knowledge about topics related to professional Scrum. And so once that is validated and that is there, then we look at your training skills. And there's a variety of methods that we use to engage candidates around how to effectively deliver training content, awareness of multiple teaching and training methods, because not all learners are the same, answering difficult questions, teaching spontaneously on a topic versus prepared topics, because you never know what may come up in a class, and all sorts of different things. But those are the 3 core phases of the journey, and you really do kind of progress through them linearly. In each section of them, you'll see a little bit of what's like a almost a backlog of activities. So if you want to learn more about those 3 steps, you'll get this overview of the PST selection process. And it gives you a little bit of what I was just describing there about the 3 phases, as well as information on like, what is this really going to cost and how long does this really take? It's not easy. It's not easy on purpose because professional Scrum trainers are an elite community that we really want to make sure understand and embrace professional Scrum the way that we talk about it here at scrum.org. So well-qualified candidates tend to do it in 1 to 2 years. We're either sort of screening candidates out of the journey relatively early because that experience and value delivery isn't really there. Like they've used Scrum, but have not used Scrum to the sense of like empirically iterating towards product goals. So that's like one of the early places people may sort of drop out of the candidate journey. And then the ever formidable level 3 assessment, which if you've talked to any PST candidates or other PSTs, that either the PSM3 or the PSPO3, they are required aspects of the PST candidate journey and tend to be a big stumbling block for people. So we're aware those are kind of the 2 big points where people struggle in the journey. So those are the things that can make it take longer sometimes. So that's there. And then ultimately, when it's all said and done with, it's about 7,000 USD for people working in primary markets. Most of you, right, being potentially from the Netherlands, right, that is also a primary market. Most of Europe is a primary market for us. And you can see that list if you just click that link that's there on the page. But that $7,000 includes assessments that you take, registration for trainer candidate specific events, as well as payment of your first year's license to become a PST. Once you're admitted into the PST candidate program, we like triple click on those details and kind of give you a line item of all the costs you can expect. We don't expose that to the public purposefully, but once you're accepted into the candidate program, a lot more detail is available for you there. So if this is sort of, you know, the first extra level of detail, I will finish my rambling by showing you this very last page, which is, well, I guess there's one more after this, the real details on the PST candidate journey. So, right, we're looking for at least 4 years of experience. And it's not just using Scrum in one place, but we're looking for a variety of contexts and environments. So it might be one big company, but I did it related to like our mobile apps and our website and HR and marketing, but I've used it in different contexts at one organization, or maybe I've gone across multiple organizations where I'm using it. And it really does need to be hands-on, working with teams or deliberately doing stuff where you are curating environments where Scrum teams are thriving. That idea of I just go around and I advise around Agile stuff and Scrum stuff, but I don't get hands-on. Those people talk a really good game, but don't really do well when it comes to assessing the real skills we're looking for with PSTs. And then there's 2 assessments here that are required in order to apply. That's your score of 95 or higher on PSM1 and a score of 85 or higher on PSM2. And I'll get really clear in that a score of 85 is a pass. So we are looking for PST candidates to overperform on PSM1. And because at the end of the day, kind of the Scrum Master accountabilities are the critical foundation of enabling Scrum and as an organization, even if your expertise is product, we still need these foundational knowledge and understanding of those Scrum Master accountabilities, because you're going to encounter that in all of the courses you may teach. Once that prerequisite stuff is there, you get into your candidate application and then an interview. It's possible you may need to iterate on that application once or twice before you get that interview, and you may need to interview once or twice before you make it into the program. All of these things are deliberately designed to be feedback loops that give you information that you can reflect on in order to better be able to help people and teams solve complex problems. That's Scrum.org's mission. Help people and teams solve complex problems. So the more you really internalize that concept for yourself and find a way to bring that to life in your interactions with us, the greater you're going to show that mission and values alignment that really is an important part of being part of our community. Phase 2, knowledge and practical experience. This is where I mentioned there's the assessments you need to take. A level 3 assessment is included. It only needs to be a passing score. PSPO1 and PAL1 are required, and then a 4th elective assessment of your choosing. Once you get into this phase of the journey, there's 2 assignments that we talk about. They're called the value testimonial and experience review. Once those are completed, you can unlock discount codes that can be used on these assessments. I talk to candidates a lot who are like, I'm not even going to apply until I have my level 3. I'm like, well, that might take you multiple attempts. And if you want to do that cheaper, go ahead and get into the program, do a couple activities. We'll give you discount codes so you're not like draining your bank account while working on these level 3 assessments. So just keep that in mind. Once you're a candidate in the program and have hit some benchmark milestones, you'll be able to get discount codes for these. Those 2 activities I talked about, value testimonial, that's really kind of a lightweight, I almost call it like blog post style case study of, here's a team or set of teams I've worked with. We've had this type of product goal. This is how we inspected and adapted over a series of sprints in order to create that value. Here's the evidence we looked at. Here's what we measured along the way. So it's kind of a little mini case study. And then experience review is a sort of a panel interview almost. You come together with a handful of PSTs and we really dig into your experience. We want to hear really good, short, crisp, concise stories about the different ways you've used professional Scrum, how you're able to convey those stories, because storytelling is a good key foundational skill for trainers. And so this is an early way to get you practicing that skill. You don't have to tell perfect stories in the experience review. You just have to give us the evidence that you have that experience. But it's a great way to get early feedback that you'll need to be successful in storytelling later on in your candidate journey. So we talk about value testimonial and experience review here. And then the last piece is enabling training skills. And so this is where we look at your ability to show up in the classroom. There's this thing called peer review you may have heard about. It is also sort of a panel session that is a simulated training experience. So you'll have about 15 minutes to deliver a prepared teach. And this is the insider information. You don't need to like start and finish an entire learning segment in the 15 minutes. You have to demonstrate an ability to deliver content and engage learners. It's not like I wanted to teach the Scrum values and I have to cram that into 15 minutes. Like, no, you may not finish your prepared teach. You do want to right size that option, but it's not about getting the content out. It's about simulating how I would deliver content, how I would engage learners, how I might handle answers in the moment. So it's a little mini simulated classroom experience there. And then you get into a few iterative rounds of kind of difficult learner questions. PSTs are going to just pepper the random difficult things that they've heard from learners. It may or may not be related to what you just taught, because guess what? In a real life classroom, they're going to ask you questions that probably don't relate to what you just talked about either. So like it helps you do all of that. A really, really rich feedback opportunity to prepare you for the flagship event that's the PST candidate journey, and that's the candidate trainer experience. It combines an applying professional Scrum APS course with a 2-day immersive workshop where you'll be with a total of 6 PST candidates going through skill drills around prepared teach topics, spontaneous teaching topics, difficult questions, and all sorts of stuff. And that really is kind of I know we don't have things like integration sprints in Real Scrum, but it's kind of your integration moment of the PST candidate journey, where you're putting it all together, how you tell stories, how you land learning moments, how you debrief a learning activity, all of that sort of stuff, and show your range of skills. And then once you're there, we need some administrative information from you. You got to sign a license agreement. You pay your first year fee. And then you get to start coming to really awesome trainer face-to-faces with people like Sander that we have all over the world. So that was really rambly. It was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but like that is the big picture of all of the different components. And so I'll stop sharing just for now and then pull back up a screen if there's specific things we want to dig into and look at. But that's the fast version of the story.
Now, I get a lot of people that send me a message on LinkedIn or wherever that they've read my blog when I just became a professional Scrum trainer, and that journey looks vastly different from what you just displayed here. You mentioned that people who are on the fast track, who are really good candidates, take about 1 to 2 years. It took me 4 years, so thank you for that. What is the reason for changing that journey?
So the PST candidate journey was redesigned last calendar year and launched in January. And there were a couple of things that we needed to do as Scrum.org around this program. We needed to make it more resilient, more transparent, more objective, and more developmental. I understand that those first 3 words are much more about us and less about you. But the reality was this amazing woman who's on our staff, Daphne Harris, was like the single person running the entire program. And that is not resilient and scalable for Scrum.org. If Daphne had gotten hit by the lottery, we would have really been out of luck. So we needed to be able to embrace a more cross-functional approach to how we administer the program. Additionally, before this, there were 3 pathways. You could become a trainer through the PSM path, through the PSPO path, or through the APSSD, what has been formerly Professional Scrum Developer pathway. We also had other provisional pathways around leadership and Kanban. But what that meant was everybody's journey was almost a little bit different, and there was too much variability. So we're like, everybody is a professional Scrum trainer. Applying professional Scrum is the core of that. So everybody will become a PSD through that lens of applying professional Scrum. And then after that, you can add a license for any course you're interested in. So a lot of those changes were around getting us to a single pathway. And then the other thing that we did was a big shift left, and it was around that level 3 assessment. It had been in this earlier version, you would go to what was called a train the trainer event, and then you take that level 3 assessment. And so you were spending a lot of time in a train the trainer event. We were spending a lot of time with you. And then maybe like only half of the people would ever pass the level 3 assessment. And like, that's expensive for all of us. So we did a big shift left. That level 3 assessment happens earlier in the journey. And then that what is now the candidate trainer experience, or had been called the TTT before this, is now kind of the culminating event at the end. The other thing that shifted left was peer review. So peer review for many candidates felt like this big, scary, like, if these PSTs don't like me, I'm not going to be able to make it in the community. And it became more of like this final go, no go, versus like an opportunity to try out your skills in front of really smart, competent people and get feedback that helps make you better. So that shift left on the peer review makes that single event less important in the overall journey, because it's not that final gate. It's really more about that developmental lens that we talked about. It's about giving you feedback that helps you grow your skills, not about are you ready or not ready to become a trainer.
I think to me that's the biggest difference between Scrum.org and other organizations, and I don't want to discredit others. Maybe I do a little bit, but I'm biased. But Scrum.org is really a community, and that's what what I noticed most about the entire journey. Like every single step is meant to make you a better trainer and not to put you down. And I know and I appreciate the fact that the whole journey could be frustrating at times, because it took me 5 attempts to pass the PSM3 with the right levels of to get the 90% score, which sucked. It did. And ultimately it made me a better trainer for that, because now my recurring feedback was to be more crisp and concise, which if you listen to my podcast, you probably never noticed. I can ramble on as well. But that's what we all have in common as PSTs. We like to talk. And most of us are consultants as well. We talk shit a lot. You should join our face-to-face drinks. Try to get a word in between. It's impossible. Maybe some questions from our lovely audience.
Yes.
Question by Niam. Given those recent changes in the PSM3 exam, is there an updated expectation of what score standard to hit on that PSM3 exam?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of stuff that's changed in our level 3 exams. Ultimately, the underlying scoring infrastructure has changed. You used to get a numbered score, and over time, the way that number score was calculated, there was like, I don't want to call it score inflation, but like what had been a 90 was really kind of an 85 because we were grading in stricter ways. And then it was like, what's really the difference? It's kind of, I understand estimation and things like planning poker are controversial, but like there's a point in the modified Fibonacci sequences, the bigger the number, the less precise it becomes. Like what's really the difference in an 85 and an 86 or an 89 and a 90? Like that's not what it's about. So earlier this year, the whole scoring mechanism behind the level 3 assessments change, where any given question is more scored on a rubric of, meets or exceeds expectations or does not meet or exceed expectations in terms of that answer. And all of those individual questions are kind of aggregated into much more of a pass-fail type rating on this assessment. So we knew that was coming when we redid the candidate journey and shifted it to you only have to pass a level 3 assessment. You do not have to overperform, because now that there's not numbers on that assessment, the concept of overperformance, like it's not the same. So that is, should you talk to someone like Sander who had to get a 90, he probably has a little frustration around like, why is it only a pass now?
No,
maybe he doesn't, but others probably do. But we really are assessing to the same threshold of knowledge that we always have.
Yeah, so that's what I get a lot from other PSTs. Exactly. Why did it change? It became easier. No, it didn't become easier. It's still a daunting thing to actually pass the PSM3 exam. And we had a much easier journey when it comes to that compared to what it is currently. Like it makes you an even better trainer now, I feel, than it used to. And I'm not saying that my journey was doing a bad job, not at all. But I think this homes in on more of the teaching skills that people have and emphasizing them even more.
Yeah. And there's something I think really important for all of you that are thinking about this journey or on this journey in some way. The landscape of agile training is becoming more and more commoditized every single day, right? 15 years ago, if you became a PST or a CST, it was absolutely a license to print money, right? 5 years ago, that wasn't as much the case. And today it's even less so. And so as the agile training landscape becomes further and further commoditized, it's important for organizations like scrum.org to really double down on concepts like experience and value generation, because that's how we stay above and maintain the prestige of our brand. Because if just any old person who's used Scrum could become a PST, there wouldn't be the value differentiator and the brand cachet and the credibility that comes with something like a PST license. So yes, is it harder now to become a PST than it was a number of years ago? Yes, and that's really a core underlying reason as of why.
Does that answer your question, Ian? Also,
Awesome.
just to give you a little tip, in this whole journey, that would be the last question that you want to ask when you're answering a question.
Yes, that's a very good one.
Did I
So this
answer
next
your
one,
question?
yeah, that came in with Allie. Do we need to pre-register for PST? When could be the exact time to inform scrum.org that we're planning to be a PST? So that's actually the one thing that I didn't show you. So let me screen share again really quick. So if all of this sounds interesting to you and you truly believe you have that prerequisite knowledge, like please like read this 7 times, this content around prerequisite experience and stuff. We do screen a lot of people out just on the application because like, oh, I've been a Scrum Master for 2 years. Great. And I'm sure those have been an awesome 2 years and you're doing really great stuff, but you need more experience than that. But once you're feeling confident about all of this, it's really just about apply now. So the way you let us know you want to become a PST is by submitting this application. It had been a web-based form that was really a terrible user experience. We have an equally terrible user experience now because you get to download a Word doc template and fill that in and then email it to us. So while it feels a little like, let's go back to the early 1990s, what you don't get in a web form is this application is not something you're going to sit down and do in 30 minutes and submit it. You're going to download a copy of this application. You're going to spend 30 minutes, fill out a version of it. You're going to go sleep on it for a day or two, have a friend peer review it, get a little bit of feedback, iterate on it once, maybe twice. If you spend more than 7 hours working on your application, you're over engineering it. So like we're not talking about a ton of time, but give yourself 1 or 2 passes on getting this content ready, and then you email that in with the instructions that are in the template. We did get complaints from people. It's like, I lost what I had in the web form. Well, you should have done it in a Google Doc and then pasted it in there. Like, we can't fix that for you. So I get that it feels a little weird to download a Word template and then fill it in, but that is the way. If you're serious and you want to get started, it's submit an application.
Got a hand raised. Chang.
Yeah, hi. Are you able to hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Like music.
All right, cool. Right, cool. I'm a bit in unique situation. So I actually cleared my PSM3 and PSPO3 sometime last year. Both above 90 with PSM3 above 95, but it doesn't seem to quite get past the application stage. I've spoken to both Daphne and Tiffany, right? So there's a feedback loop where I actually I had a call with them. So just a caveat, there's no hard feelings. So I realized that Scrum.org tends to give feedback in terms of like coach-like questions, right? So sometimes we have to make a smart guess on like, okay, so based on that feedback or that question, how should I amend my application so that I present what is needed in order to get past that stage? But I seem to be struggling on that stage, right? And maybe that's point number 1. And on the second point, remember you were saying that if possible, try to submit the application early so that you don't spend your own money. Once again, I'm in a unique situation where I did submit it a couple of years ago. I had to say that I'm a little bit young in terms of like in the workforce. So the reply I got back then was that, oh, it seems like you have some good experience. We encourage you to accumulate a couple more years, which is why I decided, okay, why not I give some experience while trying to tackle on the examination on my own course, right? So now I personally see it as a awkward situation that I don't know how to move the needle, right? So just wondering any suggestion.
Yeah, and I'll be happy. I'll drop in fact, I'll go ahead and do it right now. That's scrum.org. If shoot me an email, I'll go look at yours and see if there's any targeted feedback I can give you, that may help you sort of decipher things. Although I hate ever hearing like, I feel confused, I don't understand what I need to adapt. That's part of what we're consistently striving to get better at. But this is what, when we have application debriefs as a team, what we often talk about is people will very frequently want to write War and Peace or Moby Dick, or give us 17 paragraphs about something that actually like is all just fluff and irrelevant information. So I'll go back to the way that I talked about value and empiricism. You got to be super, super clear, concrete examples of, I have used Scrum professionally, not mechanically, because I did these things. And I've used it in these multiple contexts and situations. And this is what we did to successfully deliver value. So like, you've got to be able to convey that through your Scrum success story and all of those sort of things. The other piece of it is really convincing evidence that you are hands-on in it. You're not just dancing around singing, telling people and espousing the values of Scrum. Because we have a lot of people who are a very, very coachy and not hands-on, and that tends not to resonate well. So just keep that in mind. And then the other piece of it is having a track record of engaging people in training style learning experiences. And so it's hard sometimes. If I'm not saying you don't have the experience, but if you don't have that experience, Tiffany and Daphne are really good at detecting BS. And so it's the way you package that evidence to be compelling, because it's about your own credibility in the classroom. But I will, if you want to shoot me a note, I'll go look at yours specifically and see if there's any other pointers I can give you.
And to add on that, something that people tend not to do for whatever reason is ask, like, I'm not sure I get it. I'm lost a little bit. Could you elaborate? Make sure that I understand, or reflect back on, this is what I think you mean. Is that correct or not?
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't say this anywhere on the page that Leslie just showed, but by no means is this like limiting or a one-dimensional thing. I mean, if you would be in an actual class, it's a relationship. Just ask questions like, I'm not sure, I'm lost, please help me out. Does that help you, Cheng?
Yeah, certainly. Cool. Thank you so much.
Sweet. Moving on.
Yeah, so Jillian had one in here. Jillian, if you could come off mute and sort of paraphrase this question in your own words, because while I'm reading it, I'm not 100% sure I'm quite grasping what you're looking for.
So, as some of you know, I am married to someone who has all of the certificates, so he can train on anything. He likes, like Pokemon, he collects them all, and he wants to train on every single aspect at scrum.org and any future classes that would be ever offered. My feeling is, for myself, if I ever wanted to go down that route, I always engaged myself in a way that I, followed the 95% rule. So I always wanted to get 95 or 100 on every test, just in case I ever wanted to be a PST in that field. But I do find myself that I only really enjoy the PSM and the PSO. So would you, I guess, say that it is better to direct yourself towards the ones you're passionate, engaging in, and not try to collect them all? And do you see that it's more successful for those trainers?
I would say, Sandra, I'm going to let you field this one, because this is much more about kind of the business of being a PST. I definitely have an opinion, but I'm really curious how you might talk about that. Do I need to collect all the licenses or not?
I think it's a very generic question, more for license advice anyway, than it has to do with being a PST. It depends, the useless consultant answer, but it depends on what makes you happy. I mean, if money makes you happy, then sure, go get them all. But if you enjoy, or you get more gratitude and satisfaction from teaching PSM, focus on that stuff. I guess it also depends on whether you're working as being self-employed, or you work for, like I do for Zebia, and I have the I'm on the lucky side where I have a specific department that just blindly fills up my agenda with all these courses, and I get informed like then and then you have to be there and there to teach this and this course. All right, cool, and that's kind of it. So it really depends on whether you are working for an organization like that or you work independently where you have to do all the marketing yourself. Some classes are by nature more popular than others. For instance, PSK or SPS. I think Scrum.org is doing a horrible job of marketing those because I think they're amazing. And that is really hard to get those in as well if you're a professional Scrum trainer. On the other side, you have PSM and PSPO, and slowly you start seeing more demand for PSM3 kind of courses. We don't have that one yet, but those are immensely popular. So again, what makes you happy? I would focus on that part.
Yeah, and follow-up is, I know I see my husband diligently, you know, going over revised materials and making sure that he's up to date on all of these informations. But what is the maybe future of Scrum.org with the continuing ed to make sure that people are no longer saying the stand up and they really understand why that changed and things? Because I work in a place where the coaches and the trainers still say stand up, and it drives me crazy because it means that not that it's a word vocabulary situation. It's more of that, what else did they miss in that change in 2020? And how do we make sure that that continuing ed and those changes that are improvements upon making sure we're more staying people focused, how do we keep those aligned?
I
Yeah,
think
so
one of the nicest
can
ones
we
about
stop
that.
them saying ceremonies, please?
yeah.
Please, nothing
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. So the Scrum Guide doesn't have ceremonies in it anymore. Sander, you started so we have made that pivot. Sander, you started talking there, so I'll let you provide some commentary and then I'll give my perspective.
What I like about the PSM material is it says somewhere in it that it takes perseverance for a Scrum Master to be successful, and it's the same in this case. These are so worn into people's vocabulary that it takes perseverance from our side as Scrum Masters or as coaches or PSTs or whatsoever to get that stuff out. It's a daily stand-up. No, it's not. It comes from stream programming, and I don't care if you do it standing up, laying down, or hanging from the ceiling, Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible. You do you, as long as you focus on that progress towards the sprint goal. I don't care how you do it, just make sure that the semantics are right. Start with that, because if you start doing the semantics wrong, then you'll lead off track down the line as well.
Yeah. And I was going to say, while to maintain your PST license, the only thing you have to do two things. You have to pay your fee to renew your license every year, and you must participate in one trainer face-to-face event, which moving into next year, they are all in person. There are no longer virtual options. So those are 2-day kind of continuing education events. They're very open space oriented. But if you're a PST who's committed to really being part of this community, like, I dare you to be that person who accidentally uses the out of date term on a Slack post. You will be reminded that that's not the correct term. Or if you use it casually in conversation at a face-to-face event, like, you're going to be reminded. Because Sander makes a good point. Like, we have years of ingrained patterns of using certain language, and not everybody's going to make the shift overnight. But the way we help hold each other accountable is by, when you have one of those things, like, oh, I'm going to catch you on it, like, don't forget, like, you're right. And always reinforce the why, because while the clear and exact language is important, the more important thing is the why behind the language and the why we do something of Scrum, whatever it be, whether it be an event or a reason something's named a way that it is, or any other practice. The why is the important part, much more than the what.
Oh, yes, I definitely concur on that, because that is, I think, the reason why it bothers me so much. It wouldn't bother me if they said stand up, if I also didn't hear them say resource in referring to people.
Exactly what I just went through.
But there are little things that also back up into, like, can we go back to the first principle of people? Yes. People first.
Let's start calling management overhead from now on, and it's going to be gone soon.
Yeah, exactly. Bestford had one in here around, why is there higher demand for PSM than PSPO? My take on this, and everybody's going to give you a little bit of a different answer, is both CSM and PSM are the market established entry level credential, no matter what your accountabilities and your focus are. And so most people, even if they are a product owner, are often getting some version of a Scrum Master certification or taking some version of a Scrum Master class first, because that's where you go learn about Scrum. Like the PSPO class doesn't really teach you Scrum. It teaches you about product ownership and a product management background. So if you don't have something like an applying professional Scrum class in your history, or you haven't taken a PSM style course, like it's going to be harder to grasp that content. As much as we would love for APS to be the market reaching foundational thing that everyone takes, the PSMs and the CSMs of the world existed first, and they got there, and that was what was established as the primary entry level course and credential. I don't ever see getting that cat back in the bag. Anybody else have a different experience or perspective of that? I kind of see Frank smirking, so I'm just sort of curious.
I don't know. Well, what's funny about that is that my first experience was PSPO, and it was actually nice. I found it a very nice way to learn about Scrum and everything.
Good.
I
That
think
is not everyone's experience.
I think it's supply and demand as well. I think there are way more Scrum Masters out there than there are product people. So a product owner, you only need one product owner for maybe 10 teams in case you work in a scaled environment, but you need a Scrum Master for pretty much every one of those teams. So there's a large difference. It's the same question as why do healthcare people get paid so little? Well, because supply and demand. Because there are so many people who can actually provide it, then you're going to get the competition out. And it's the same with Scrum Masters. Everyone and their mom wants to be a Scrum Master these days, so everyone takes a course. There is no, I think it was Ken Schwaber himself who said that because it's not an actual profession, because in order for it to be a profession, there needs to be like a board or a committee to oversee, the ethics of people applying it. And if that would be the case, it would be a lot harder to actually become a Scrum Master, and then it would diversify. But we're not going to do that. Ali.
Yes, I will also want one thing with you. The thing is that sometimes the organization, the companies, they are not sure about the Scrum Master, what they want. They will just post in LinkedIn somewhere else, we are looking for the Scrum Master, because I was in a meeting, in a job interview, and they ask, okay, this is your role, you have to do it. Okay, I say, okay, you are looking for someone moderator, you are not looking for the Scrum Master, you need someone to moderate your meetings, and you just remove some time slot from your calendar. That's it, nothing else. You are not looking for the Scrum Master.
Yeah,
I think it's also another reason, could be.
That kind of relates to what Gillian was asking. Their management and leadership, those are vastly different. But the understanding of that transition and the difference between those two, that's completely missing, because people mostly in those positions are still in legacy structures and thinking in management education, and management does not get educated to lead and to pave the way. They are educated to tell people what to do and how to do it, because they get promoted to their own level of self-incompetence. That's where you get the Peter Principle here. That's where you start losing people. They don't know how to set the environment for people to thrive, yet they expect other people to know exactly what to do it, and yet they undermine them. So they don't know what to lead and how to lead, because usually leaders are the last one to be educated, and therefore they are laggers by default. That's where you start getting this skewed environment where people don't really know what Scrum Masters are supposed to do and how to implement it and what kind of behavioral change people need. Usually it's like, we can do this framework in 3 months. Sure, but to make the actual mindset shift, that's going to take you 3 to 7 years. Well, we don't want to do that. All right, we'll continue with our project management methods. It's not like Scrum is a Harry Potter magic wand that one size fits all, and now we're agile. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. We have comments from Jan and Frank in here around the how much training experience and on what topics. And so Frank, this is me looking you in the eyeballs. Like, I see the inconsistency you just pointed out. So like, I'll go get curious about that. Like, oh, that's fascinating customer feedback that we have that disconnect, because I would not expect Frank to have gotten feedback that says, I'm sorry, if you don't have, you know, the experience facilitating a 2-day long training, like that's not good enough, because that's not what we have as our prerequisite requirements. Now, let me say this. When we get into the assessing your training skills, we are going to be looking for you to demonstrate the stamina and the range of techniques that's necessary to hold the container for 2 days worth of training, because that is that most popular duration of courses. But you shouldn't be being asked to have that experience before getting in as a candidate necessarily. You do need experience facilitating learning oriented events though. And this is where kind of the difference between like facilitating a workshop and teaching a course lies. When you're teaching a course, you are accountable for landing learning outcomes, which means in the moment, potentially using multiple techniques and approaches to get the topic across and ensure that you're confirming understanding with your participants. But on a more of a workshop facilitation thing, like you're more looking to achieve a deliverable or outcome. It's not necessarily about landing the learning. It's about accomplishing a thing. And so just keep that in mind when you're looking at your experience. Just facilitating workshops probably isn't enough. It's got to be teaching oriented sort of stuff. And it doesn't have to be with Agile. I mean, making it with Agile is better, but like things like OKRs are definitely Agile adjacent. So it wouldn't be lost on me that we might not have a post daily debrief. I was reviewing an application. They really don't have any Agile training experience, but they've done stuff with OKRs. Is that enough? Like us having a conversation about that. But it like squarely in the Agile space, preferred, but not 100% required. In that instance. So it is acceptable to have a range of experiences with half day or full day things should be sufficient to get you in as a candidate. And I'll go back and double check with the team to make sure we're not inconsistent in applying that standard. Other questions on that, Frank or Jan?
Your silence.
Yeah, thank you. That helped me very much. Thank you very much.
Good. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Like, I'm lucky enough to have found a few PSTs that would take me along and let me go train with them. But it was kind of a bummer because in my organization, it's really hard to do that on my own.
Yeah.
If you need anyone to co-train with, feel free to reach out.
I'm doing one next week with Will, and he also told me to say hi to both of you, by the way. Will Sadler.
Cool.
Yeah.
Say hi for me back.
Yeah, Will's pretty awesome. What else is anyone curious about?
What's the toughest question that you've ever seen in the peer review?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah. I can ask the others, but they haven't been part of it.
Yeah, I've only ever been to one peer review.
What was the toughest question?
I don't remember. Honestly. And I hate that's a terrible. I mean, I've watched a handful of peer review recordings, but it's much more from the perspective of like, we can't really decide like what's the most important piece of feedback to give to this person. I'm not paying attention to what the questions are. I'm paying attention to what the candidates say.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. What I will say though, the important part, whether it be in a interview or the candidate trainer workshop or experience review or peer review or the candidate trainer, anything like that. When Sandra mentioned this earlier, it's like, when you get the question, paraphrase the question. Do I understand what you're asking? Give a short version of the answer, like the mic drop version, and say, does this feel like I'm on the right track? Do you need more? Because it's really tempting to just ramble for 30 minutes, but give that short version of the answer. Check in for alignment. Is this on the track that you're looking for? Because they might say, actually, that tells me exactly what I need, and you can move on. And then double click, then double click, then double click, but just monologuing for 5 minutes after a question without incrementally checking for understanding and then checking for understanding at the end is kind of a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And I think it's an interesting segue maybe to Gillian's remark. I've seen blank where it's juggle on answering all questions, but also staying on topic and getting through all materials. And I think that's interesting to know that there are mandatory exercises in it, but you don't have to cover every single bit of it. Yeah. If I just look at myself, I flash forward and go back through the entire thing throughout the content, depending on what kind of questions that I get. Usually I lay out the land, like this is the agenda we're going to start with, very high level. We're going to zoom into the Scrum Master, but you'll see like the last 2 chapters, they usually get weaving through all the other stuff that I do. And I rarely really cover the last 2 chapters or 3 chapters of the course really in depth, because I have answered that with all the questions I've answered previously, or just skipping ahead with all that stuff. And I think that's good to know, that you don't have to go through that sequence of stuff. You can make this your own experience. One of the skills of a Scrum Master characteristics is to know how to read the room, or the ability to read the room. And this is one of those things. You want to know where your audience might benefit from and what might be important, because maybe Frank has a very specific question that is not relevant to the rest of the group. Maybe, all right, let's do this in a coffee break later, Frank, or during lunch, and let's skip this question for now, or park it, put it on a parking lot, or wherever you want. And then you can move on.
Yeah. As well as knowing that curriculum and being like, this is a great question. We're going to address that tomorrow a little bit before lunch.
Exactly.
You don't have to always open up the topic when the question comes, because sometimes it's right. It might be a coffee break thing, or it might be listen, I promise you're right. That is interesting. And we're going to get to that later. I don't do that well. So this would be a do as I say, not as I do, if you end up in a classroom with me though.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it, I think, because everyone can develop their own style. Yeah. And I think that's something that both Daphne and Tiffany are looking for as well during these early conversations, is to sense the authenticity. Because if you're trying to be someone like Gunther Verheijen or Ken Schwaber himself or Ryan Ripley, and you're going to mimic them, it's going to rub off on the wrong way in your audience. So really, you be you and don't be anyone else.
Yeah.
What might work for me, because I improvise half of everything I do during these courses, that might not work for everyone. Yeah.
There's also something that we haven't said that Sander just sort of brought alive in me, and it's around, there's 2 sides of it. You can't be you have to be yourself. You've got to be authentic, and you can't be a one-trick pony. Like, you have to have a range of teaching and training techniques, and you can't always answer questions in the same exact formula. Like, being sort of robotic in one note and all of that isn't very effective. So you got to have, like, a range of techniques that you can apply in that. And when we give you feedback around, like, wow, we've seen you use this same technique over and over and over again, we need to see something different. Or we give you any sort of feedback, don't be that person. I was about to use a slightly more or slightly less professional language, and so I caught myself.
Be my guest. I'm good.
Yeah, there's a humbleness around it. Like, how any piece of feedback you're given, how can you find truth in it? You may not agree with it, but where can you find 2% truth in that and see, like, oh, I see how someone else could have seen that or perceived that or whatever it might be. Because feedback is a gift in that sort of way. And it's that opportunity for you to kind of look within and see. When PST candidates come back at us with an arrogance and like, you don't know who you are sort of swagger, like that's not helping you get through the journey. Or can I just, I'm really good at this. I do this and I work with a bunch of other PSTs all the time. Can I just skip forward and go straight to the peer review or go straight to the candidate trainer? No, you can't. CSTs, people who are existing certified Scrum trainers. Can't I, like, do I really have to do all this stuff? Yes, absolutely. We have had CSTs apply to the program and fail miserably at some of our core concepts and fundamentals. It doesn't matter who you know, you're not special. You get to go through the same transparent and objective journey that everybody else does.
I think that's a nice link to Besford's question, why Scrum.org certifications are less popular than Scrum Alliance one when it comes to job announcements, especially in the US. I know that they, Scrum Alliance, are longer in the market, but is Scrum.org doing anything on that regard to close the gap? I think that's an interesting question.
It is absolutely geo by geo, right? And yes, Scrum Alliance is more popular and talked about in the US. We have got our largest concentration of trainers is in Europe, and the largest number of trainers per capita is in the Netherlands. I don't know why another single human that lives in the Netherlands would ever want to become a PST. There's already so many of you. But the more of you there are, the more learners there seem to be coming out of the woodwork. So like something's working, right? Like it's fascinating to me. But the US market is evolving in ways that is different than the rest of the geos. I think we're seeing commoditization faster here than we are in other places. I think you're seeing Agile and Scrum get a bad name faster here than you are other places. And so it's not just about like, are we more popular than Scrum Alliance in the US? It is a lot of conflicting market dynamics and trends around digital transformation and industrial mindset that are at play here, that I don't know if Scrum.org invested $70 million in marketing just in the US if we would actually overcome it. It's bigger things at play.
It's the same, to riff on that, it's the same kind of question. Why SAFe is so super popular and dominant when it comes to scaling frameworks, because they have an amazing marketing machine. And I'm not saying that the SAFe itself is bad, but it really lends itself to be misused, which is why I dislike SAFe. I think it's the least safe framework out there. But then again, looking at Scrum.org, you're very modest when it comes to your marketing. You have a different style of marketing, hence why there's a big difference in these two.
Yeah. There are no current conversations about updating the Scrum Guide.
Sorry, come again?
Well, Florin asked a thing about Scrum Guide updates. And so I was just like, there are no current conversations about updating the Scrum Guide.
When it becomes relevant, they will, though.
Yes. Yeah, it's not saying there will never be updates, but there is not a new increment in progress.
That's the thing, right? Inspection and adaptation applies to Scrum.org as well.
Yeah.
And you'll see the minute a new revised version of the Scrum Guide hits, people will start to complain. Because it's changed, and change is scary. So that kind of ramps up. So that's why you also don't want to overwhelm people with change in these Scrum Guides. And by the time that people are finally used to the 2020 version of the Scrum Guide, maybe, it's a very tricky thing as well to find a fine balance. When do you really want to release that? Because you can tweak like the smaller things, but then you're then you're not going to get the change that you want, the actual change in behavior, because it's so marginal. So you have to do a very large release every once in a, I don't know, 6 years.
Yeah. The other thing you'll notice is that every iteration of the Scrum Guide is slimmer, less prescriptive, and more nuanced, because it really is about, like, Scrum by itself is very, very simple, and few things are what makes it Scrum. And it's all of the complementary practices and techniques and things is where you get that ability to make it work in your context. And so as a trainer, this is especially important to differentiate between what is Scrum, core Scrum, and what are the complementary practices that you bring forward to amplify the value created through Scrum, because that's where all the variability comes in terms of making things work in one specific context for the versus the other. And so really knowing yourself and being a student of what are the latest trends in terms of complementary practices and those sort of stories are definitely important.
Interesting question from Liam. Back to earlier point / question from the prerequisite. It's okay that Scrum experience is not necessarily or even mostly as a Scrum Master. It can be more on the agile leadership and coaching side of things, as long as we are still working hands-on with teams.
There's a tradition holder mindset in the organization of kind of the only way to really become a PST is to have been a Scrum Master. And there are still moments where aspects of that are alive, even though you don't have to have been. But people who have been Scrum Masters often have better stories and experience and things that resonate. So applying professional Scrum is the foundation of becoming a PST. And it is more challenging for people that come from a more coaching stance and a leadership stance to really give good concrete examples and resonate with the practitioner who is the learner. And even if you're teaching a PAL class, you're going to be having those practitioners in the room, and you've got to relate to them and tell the stories of, like, you're right, figuring out how to do that is awful. This is what I did. This is what we did with teams. This is, and those stories and those breadth of experience at the hands-on level. So Frank, if you really are, or sorry, Neve, if you really are looking at, you've been more of a coach and you've been more of a leader who truly has been hands-on, you should be okay. But just know you'll probably get more harder questions in that regard.
Thank you. That does help a lot, because we don't always all follow the same path to get to where we are now.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I had never been on a Scrum team till I worked at scrum.org. I worked with tons and tons of Scrum teams and taught and guided and supported, but I was never actually on a Scrum team till I worked at scrum.org. So I don't know, for what that's worth. I'm not really sure it's relevant at all. All right, Frank had another thing in here. You mentioned a broad range of experience with Scrum is needed, and when your own company, multiple departments work in product development of robotics, zero teams developing different robots.
But it depends on how you formulate it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say or make very apparent in your application form, I've only worked with one team. I've been here for 12 years, but I've only worked for one single team. It really depends on the narrative, I guess.
Yeah. Because, like, there are people that we have apply that their resumes show tons of different experience. But anytime we ask them for an example, they only give us the same 4 examples over and over and over again. So like it is really about showcasing breadth of examples and experience. Like we were solving a technical debt issue, we were solving a product market fit issue, we were solving a this, a that. Like as long as you have that range, you should be okay. But I'm not gonna say Tiffany and Daphne might not give you a hard time.
We're Dutch, we can take that. Assuming Frank's Dutch by judging by his accent.
Yeah.
What instead of typing, I'll talk. Just hear different voices. Now, would we get different questions because not all of us come from a software background either? Like I'm tech adjacent, but I coded stuff 20 years ago. That doesn't really count.
Yeah.
What I did in university does not count here. So that's still just, you get your questions, you answer what you answer, you just back up what you're doing.
Yeah. We would love less IT people in the community. Please bring that diversity. Like we're looking for not software stuff as much as possible.
Frank and his robotics.
Yep.
Any advice to pass the latest version of the PSM3? Yes, first one is to filter down all the practical experience that you have. And why you want to think picture perfect Valhalla kind of Scrum. Like, this is how it actually is supposed to be like. And maybe if you have time left, in case that you do, you can add a practical example, like in scenario X, I did this, but this is basically what the Scrum guide says. Also looking at Leslie, how far can I go to give advice on this as a PSD?
I will stop you if I think you've gone too far.
All right, cool. Something that I did, because I can only answer how I prepared my own PSM3 all the million times that I took it, is I rewrote the Scrum guide. Literally, I copied it and I rewrote it. And I focus on, this is what the Scrum guide says, here's why, and then maybe a practical example. And you'll see that throughout the whole journey of what we do as PSDs are really tying that back on the reasoning why. So what do the Scrum values have to do with this, or the whole pillars of empiricism? Focus on those things first, and maybe if you have time left, answer or provide a practical example. Also, count the amount of question marks that are in the question and give the same amount of actual answers. If there are 3 question marks, like usually there's a large chunk of text, and there are 3 questions in there. And the pitfall that I had, or that I fell for, was I would provide a single answer. Like, this is it. No, there are 3 question marks, so give 3 answers. If people and PSDs who volunteer to grade these things, they are skimming over it. They're looking for 3 answers.
Yeah. I would also practice like using our open assessments that are free there on the Scrum.org website, and write your answer to the question, but use those kind of things as prompts, and just set like a 90-second timer for yourself and write as much as you can about that question in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And that practices the kind of the skill drill of concise writing. This is not a grammar assessment. We are not evaluating the eloquence of what you write. We are evaluating the content of it. We fully recognize that in order to prevent fraud and cheating, you can't copy paste. My biggest hurdle when I was taking the level 3 was I'd start writing an answer and then I'd want to reorder the sequence in which I was talking about stuff. So I'd want to like cut this thing from the end and move it up, because it was like that was a better way to say it. And it's like, no, you can't copy paste, and just like get over the eloquence of it. Because it's not that sort of assessment.
And maybe a last tip in that sense is there are PSM3 practice sessions within the Discord community run by either Florin or by Marge, where just a bunch of people who are not PSDs come together, and you can find a numerous amount of random PSM3 kind of questions if you Google. Like I'm not saying they're actual questions, but it's more about getting through the format of it, and that's what the group does. They go through it and they practice more like what should we focus on and where can we improve.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really helpful.
Most welcome. March just rejoined. Little shout out to the PSM3 practice sessions. You're welcome. Any other questions? So we're slowly crawling towards the end set of the time box. And as you know, time boxes are there to not take more than that, but we can take less. So feel free to shout all the questions that you still have left.
Shout them all at once. 3, 2, 1.
Lauren, you unmuted.
Yeah, I have a question about the new ways of training, immersive training, I think it's called. Maybe you can provide some details on.
Yeah, so you're talking about like Scrum.org courses can be delivered
Yeah,
live and in person or live virtual training. They can be delivered in a flipped format. They can be delivered immersive. Like you're talking, when you say immersive, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So maybe you can provide more information about how, as a PST, you should prepare for those ones. I mean, what are the differences between 2-day classes? Doesn't matter if they are physical or virtual,
yeah,
versus the learning which takes, I don't know, several weeks or months.
Yeah. So the reason we are bringing flipped and immersion programs to market is all about learner effectiveness and knowledge retention. I can't cite the statistics off the top of my head, but traditional virtual, even if it's like spread over 4 days or an in-person 2-day class, like the half-life of knowledge retention, like you remember so little of it after like a week or 2 weeks or a month later. So it really is all about spaced repetition and giving people an opportunity to do stuff, because doing stuff cements more knowledge in your brain. And yes, traditional live virtual and traditional in-person, there are activities where you do stuff, but through both flipped and immersive, it gives you opportunities outside the classroom to practice doing it in your own context. So I think from a trainer's perspective, they are all of the same learning objectives. The courses are the courses. It's just how you deliver it becomes a little bit different. And so some of what Sander talked about around, and we were speaking of earlier, like I've got 2 days, my agenda becomes a lot more fluid. You're going to have a lot less of that in a flipped learning mode or an immersive learning mode, because like we are intentionally focusing on this concept, and then you're going to go practice this concept. And then we're going to focus on this concept and you're going to practice it. So it's a lot more about the art of facilitating learning debriefs and other things, that those are the skills where you get to stretch and be a little more creative. You don't see as much fluidity in like the agenda of the 2-day class when you're in a little bit more of that immersive framework. That's at least from like my experience in engaging in those sort of methods. It does tend to be a little bit more structured. Sander, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty good.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah. Liberating structures are always really popular. Jan put a question in around that. We are not prescriptive in terms of the how you facilitate a lot of activities. Liberating structures are great, and liberating structures can become very fatiguing. I talked about a one-trick pony, right? Yeah.
Training from the back of the room.
You don't want to use the same liberating structure for everything, but also only using liberating structures are not the answer for everything. So if you're only ever using liberating structures, that is again kind of can be one note.
After a while, liberating structures tend to become more incaptivating than anything else. Yeah. Training from the back of the room is one of those things that you can jump on.
Yeah, thank you. So I take it more as a complementary tool than like the main show. So thank you.
Any other questions, lovely people? If not, we can slowly start to wrap up this meeting with 9 minutes to go.
We can't wrap it up fast. We have to slowly wrap up.
Maybe.
We will all talk in slow motion.
Soak up the entire time box just for time box sake. All right, then we're gonna call it a day for here. I recommend the PSFS course. Yes, Professional Scrum Facilitation Skills. That's a good one. Absolutely. That also leans on liberating structures, but much more than just that. So that's always a good one. Yeah.
There may or may not be another Professional Scrum skills focused class coming very soon.
Potentially.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
So should I wait then?
Oh,
it depends.
It does not deal with facilitation because that one already exists.
Keep an eye out.
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. This is a perfect moment to call it quits.
Yeah.
I will see you next week, Leslie. And if not, I'll see you at the face-to-face in Delft.
No, I will not be there.
Oh, I thought you would. Then I'll see you in Burlington.
I will not be there either, but that's okay.
Then I will see you.
I'll see you in Australia.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much for being here.
Yes.
Thank you all for being here as well. And I wish you a very pleasant day.
Yeah. Feel free to reach out if y'all need anything.
Thanks for organizing it.
Most welcome.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for organizing it.
Most welcome.
En verder als je dat meende van co-trainen. Ik heb gelukkig deze maand dan dat ik met Wil kan trainen en in november met Emiel.
Ja.
Maar en dan zou ik genoeg ervaring moeten hebben, ook volgens die feedbackvorm. Maar ja, ik ben me ook bewust dat veel te veel van mijn kennis via Wil komt. Dus
One trick pony, ja.
Nou ja. Dat is niet te verkeerde, maar...
Nee, maar het is wel goed om je eigen ervaring
om een beetje te breder te doen.
Ja.
Dus uit het... nou ja, moet ik ook zeggen, dit jaar is het vol, maar volgend jaar zou ik graag een keer co-trainen als je dat...
Zeker. Gebruik me daar vooral voor.
Ja, ik via Discord deze het even al een berichtje sturen. Of, ja.
Komt goed.
Thanks man.
Graag gedaan. Fijne avond.
Hetzelfde. Fijne avond.
Ali, what can I do for you?
Yes. Then, hi, Sander. The thing is here today, I see this summit in Azerbaijan, Baku, in November, 4th of November. You are also there. What's about this summit? Because I didn't hear about it. I'm trying to engage me a little bit more with the conferences, workshops, summit, and such kind of things. And actually, I have registered a little bit late for your next month, end of September, end of October, in Zebia. You have a meetup. Yes, but I didn't get any response because I will come from Germany and I have to drive around 5 hours. If I will join, I have to book a hotel for myself and stay there.
Let me check, because as it so happens, I am the organizer of the event, so I can check that out.
Think so many people also registered. Some of them, I think we are in the waiting list.
That might be the case, yes.
Yes.
I can go and check out if we can increase the number of attendees. but the room isn't that big, unfortunately. Let's see. We have a waiting list of 19 people currently. I don't think I see you in the waiting list. I see the only Ali that I see is Ali Tagigi.
No, I'm not the person.
No, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. I'm gonna go through the actual list. I don't see you on there. That's odd.
That's fine. Because I'm sure about it.
I'll go and check it out.
Okay. I will write you.
Usually my experience though is that 40% doesn't show up. So let's see. Coming back to your question about Azerbaijan, what do you want to know about it?
What this summit is about its force to join, because I'm planning to join one summit or one workshop or some conferences. I think because I need to improve a little bit my knowledge. It's fine. I can just improve it by watching some videos, reading some books and the things, but make some new networks and also experience, sharing the experience is the only thing that can help me.
Yeah. So the one in Azerbaijan is definitely going to help because I'm going to be there together with my colleague Tom. Chris Stone is there, Arthur Marganari, John Coleman, and bar the latter one, bar John. Usually we hang out together a lot, like John, Chris, me, Tom, and Arthur. So if you want to join, tag along, and you can definitely make a cool new network connection to that.
Okay, and then you will touch about.
I think because we
Agile.
have, yeah, I think just by heart, let me go and check because we have a whole list of stuff that we talk about that we submit to conferences. Mostly our tons, there's always a next sprint gets submitted or gets accepted. I think that's going to be the one. I don't see it on there. Yeah, I think it's going to be tons. There's always the next sprint. So thinking about what's most valuable right now, where do we see the anti-patterns in organizations, and how to. It's more of a mindset disease, right? Where people just blindlessly spill over work, and people or teams are budgeted for an entire year without having to think about what's most valuable now because they are granted that budget, so they don't have to think about it. And we teach people, or we share our experience from how it goes from the toxified version and what you can do to go to recovery road, if you will. And I think that's either that or Montreal is the last one that we're going to do for this specific talk, because then we're going to pull the plug. We've been doing this for a year and a half, and it's always the same one that gets selected. And by now, I'm just sick of it. I'm done talking about the same thing over and over and over again.
Okay, then good to know. Is there any
give me 2 seconds. Yes, sir. Sorry.
And is there any conference that wants to join? All the conferences are valuable. It's fine, but sometimes the conferences, it's recommended that we shouldn't miss them because from the certificates, okay, side, it's fine. I can pass. Hopefully.
No, that's a really good question. I'm not sure for the remainder of this year. I would say because the lineup in Baku is really good. There's going to be a virtual one organized by India, Agile NCR. I mean, you don't have to go anywhere, so it's not that expensive. That's going to help. I'm not sure. Other than that, there's one in Zurich as well, the Agile Leadership Day. I think it's in either end of October or halfway through November. I'm not going to be there, but usually it's the one that I attended last year where we were speaking that was very valuable, well organized. Zurich is a very nice city to visit as well, so I can definitely recommend that. But it usually doesn't come with a bigger name. So I know there's one in Amsterdam, I think later in the year. Not 100% sure, but usually those get the bigger names.
For me, Europe is so easier because I can just drive
Yeah.
without any visa. And the things is here because sometimes I have some visa issues.
Yeah. Where are you from originally?
Originally from Iran. I'm Ali, the person who sent
Yeah, I know. Oh, right. Yeah, I know. But I forgot that you were from Iran. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Then that's it. Okay, then I think I have registered again for the meetup.
Let me go and check.
Yes. But I'm sure today I did it. I don't know what's wrong because that was in Dutch. I cannot understand Dutch very well. I can guess Dutch because it's somehow like Deutsch.
Yeah, it sort of looks the same, doesn't it? Let's see. Manage. Yeah, then now I do see 20 people on the waiting list. Yeah, there I see it. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Keep an eye on that, and I'll go check it out if we can raise the number of attendees.
Yes, I will stay in contact because it's in Netherlands. I can just do it anytime because I have also asked my company.
Yeah.
The day I will do home office, then I will just book a hotel from there, just work and join you.
Sure. Yeah, there's a hotel at the end of the street.
Okay, perfecto. Then thank you so much.
You should
Have a nice evening.
receive the hoodie soon. I contacted the warehouse, and it should be there soon.
Hopefully, but I will inform you. No worries.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, man. See ya.
Bye bye.